Let me just start off by saying that if I see a glimmer of like gold right outside my window, I'm just going to assume that McFarlane has come for me. He's probably done with me talking all this smack about him, and he's going to choke me out with his chain. I've just accepted my fate. He may just beat me to death with one of his new Spawn action figures. Anyways, all jokes aside, he's really going to hate me for this. And honestly, I feel like I've been on a little bit of a trend here of just bashing on McFarlane, but I've said this before and I'll continue saying it. There are times when I do criticize McFarlane, and there are times when I am a huge fan of his. It just depends on what he's releasing. And honestly, I just like to give my personal take, my personal opinion. And that's what we're going to do today, because I kind of touched a little bit on this with that Kickstarter video where I kind of talked about all of the different offerings and accessories and things of that nature that were going to be offered from his Kickstarter campaign. However, I thought that I would dive a little bit deeper into this because I do feel like it's worth mentioning. It is worth dissecting. And honestly, I want to hear from you guys. I want to hear everybody's perspective. As I said in the previous video, I may just be blowing things out of proportion. I may be making too much of it, but I still like sharing my personal opinion. I like hearing what all of you guys have to say. So let me know down below in the comments section. Now, there were a number of issues when it comes down to McFarlane's Kickstarter. The biggest one being the fact that not a lot of the goals or not a lot of the objectives with the Kickstarter were made clear. He essentially just said, these are the accessories that are going to be made available once we hit a certain number, but he never made that number clear. And as he was hitting like random numbers, he made a lot of these accessories available. Now, the first goal or the first objective obviously was $100,000 in backing, and that was just for these for the figures to actually go live, or for them to go into production. From then on, he had random goals at like $250,000, $500,000, $750,000, and he would essentially just add like a couple of accessories from the whole lot of accessories that he had already revealed. So he was just kind of randomly throwing stuff in there. There was no real concise direction, and it was very confusing for a lot of people. There were a lot of us, and I'll include myself, that just assumed that all of the accessories were going to be included, but it turns out that he was adding them little by little, which again makes absolutely no sense. I mean, it definitely makes sense for him because people are going to continue to be on pins and needles, and they may be a little bit more motivated to purchase maybe multiples or doubles of something. But if you're a consumer, it makes absolutely no sense because you don't know exactly what to expect, and you're banking on the generosity of McFarlane. Like, what if somebody burnt his toast that morning? Does that mean that you're not getting that extra shield or that extra hammer? I'm just a little bit baffled that he would decide to do it like this. But honestly, that's not even the biggest issue with this Kickstarter. It is definitely one of the issues, but the biggest one to me has to be the fact that these figures are essentially ready to ship out. Okay, now most of the time, and I know a lot of people were losing their minds because I said this in the previous video, but honestly, a lot of these Kickstarter, or I should say like 99% of the Kickstarter campaigns a couple of years ago, or a few years ago, not just for action figures but just in general, were mostly meant for smaller OMs. You know, people that didn't have multi-million-dollar backings, that could just not afford to put product into production. And usually what they do is they get like some sort of product sample. Maybe they get some digital renders or pictures of those samples, or maybe like a prototype or something along those lines, and they would maybe make videos and just document as much of their product as they possibly could. Maybe they would post like random images of how the engineering works, and then obviously like the different tier levels. This is exactly the formula that people have been doing now for quite some time, or the OMs have been utilizing. Even Hasbro, the company that people love to hate on just as much as McFarlane, they do something similar, but at least their product hasn't gone into production. They only have the one product sample, the one prototype to be able to showcase, because they haven't gone into production. These are not getting shipped. They're not in a facility somewhere being manufactured, because it's a Kickstarter campaign. That's what Kickstarter campaigns are for. And unfortunately, McFarlane did something here that isn't technically wrong, and it isn't officially like against the law or anything crazy like that, but it definitely is a little bit shady, and I would almost say it's like morally reprehensible here. And I hate to use the word abusing the system, but I feel like that's what McFarlane is doing here. He just wants an early payday. He wants to already have the figures ready to ship and receive the money as quickly as he possibly can. I know he makes it out to seem like, oh, the figures are coming extremely early. Look at how quickly you're going to have the figure, but that's not the main objective here. The reason that he is doing this is just to get the money into his bank account as quickly as possible. And it's incredibly comical because I actually do watch quite a few content creators in the action figure community, and I saw a lot of them kind of defending this mindset or this way of doing business. A lot of them seem to think that it's a good idea to essentially have to like pay up front for a pre-order, because these figures are, as I said, right around the corner. They should be shipping out within the next 3 to 4 months. And there were a lot of these big time YouTubers that make action figure content really defending McFarlane for this type of etiquette. And personally, I just thought it was really comical, the fact that they would go out of their way to defend McFarlane for conducting their business this way. And I never bring this up, but you sometimes have to question the loyalty of some of these content creators, just because I feel like some of these guys are always going to be soft on the OMs, because guess what? You can't bite the hand that feeds. You can't go after McFarlane too hard and then not be able to receive free product to review on your channel, because a lot of these guys are living off of their YouTube or making quite a bit of compensation through YouTube. Maybe a lot of them are not 100% living off of it, but it is a pretty big stream of revenue into their household, and so they're not going to go out there and completely criticize McFarlane. And I feel like this has been kind of a pretty common trend recently. I'm not going to call them out by name because I think that's really unethical, but I will say they are content creators that I myself follow, that I'm a huge fan of, that I'm consistently there watching their content. But I felt like there was a little bit of a low blow to the community to have them stand on the side of McFarlane, where I personally feel like it's a little bit shady. It's a little bit unethical. I don't feel like he needed to do this. Honestly, he only would have to wait 2 to 3 months to actually receive the money from the consumer. Instead, he's going through a Kickstarter campaign. It just feels like anybody can get in on the Kickstarter campaign trend, and it really doesn't matter. It's not about getting some project off the ground or helping out a small OM release their product. Now it just feels like a lot of these bigger OMs are coming in and essentially just steamrolling the competition, because let's be brutally honest, there are a lot of these crowdfunds that actually fail because there are other big projects from big OMs that are simultaneously being launched. You could have Hasbro doing maybe like a HasLab project, and then 2 other small little companies trying to launch their small little action figure line. And obviously, us being big Marvel fans or just being more familiar with Hasbro, we're going to go with Hasbro, knowing full well that Hasbro or McFarlane could easily just fund their own projects. Even if they are pretty big and they're on the higher end, they could easily fund them and then ship them out to retailers and essentially streamline the entire process. But instead, like I said, I feel like they're moving these smaller OMs out of the way and exploiting the whole Kickstarter campaign craze. There's a part of me that almost feels like this was an entire facade. Like there was no point during this entire process where McFarlane legitimately needed a crowdfunded campaign, because this project was never at risk. I don't even know where he got the $100,000 number from, but the fact that these figures are already in production makes me think that it was irrelevant how many figures he sold. It's also worth mentioning that this kind of undercuts the third party or the middleman here, which is the retail chains like Target, Walmart, GameStop. And I know most of you guys are thinking, well, that's a good thing, right? We're getting this directly from McFarlane. That means we're going to save money, right? Shipping is going to be simpler. No, it actually means that there's less product being included and the shipping costs are going to be astronomically high, I'm assuming, because McFarlane just doesn't have the connections to be able to ship and streamline the process as much as, for example, Walmart or Target, where they have multiple different stores scattered across the country, and the way that they ship and handle product is not only cheaper, but it's a lot quicker and way more efficient than anything that McFarlane is able to offer, because his entire corporation or his entire entity is set in one place. I mean, there aren't like multiple different McFarlane stores. There's just no way for him to be able to match what Target and Walmart are able to do, and that really is going to show in the final price for the item, right? Because you're going to have to purchase it, you're going to have to pay taxes, and then eventually you're going to have to pay for shipping. I think that's calculated at the end depending on where you live, but I doubt it's going to be a very small fee. I'm assuming it's going to be like maybe $8 to $9, maybe up to like $12, $13. Like I said, depending on what region you live in, but that's definitely not a cheap price to pay. Whereas in, like, let's say if you were shipping directly from even GameStop or Amazon or Walmart, you would probably have free shipping available and you would have just as much product in your pocket. But I'm assuming that McFarlane is going to cut costs on his end because he doesn't have to pay that extra fee at like Target or Walmart for shelf space. And the end result is that you'll probably have to be paying a little bit extra for this collectible. Like I said, it's not the end of the world. It's not the biggest issue. I'm sure that there are many other things in the world right now happening, but it's just a really quick observation on my end. And I've always said this, I like sharing my personal opinion, my personal thoughts. If you're going to support McFarlane and this entire Kickstarter campaign, regardless of how much you have to pay, then you're a true fan. And honestly, anything that I say is not going to deviate your mindset, but hopefully you at least kind of sit down and think a little bit about this and just kind of digest it. And like I said, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm making too much out of this, but I think the community really has to kind of get together and really think things through, because I feel like for the most part OEMs have been taking advantage of a lot of their consumer bases, and this could be a prime example of that. I'm not going to go out on a limb and say this is exactly what's happening, but just the way that McFarlane has handled this entire Kickstarter campaign, I think has raised a lot of eyebrows, and it's important for the community to raise their voices and, kind of question what's going on. But again, that's just my personal take, my personal opinion. Let me know your thoughts down below. Am I wrong? Am I right? Am I just being dramatic? Very curious to see what you guys have to say. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you guys like this type of rambling nonsense about action figures, make sure to stay tuned because we do this probably like 3 to 4 times on a weekly basis. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Stay safe out there. And as always, the most important part of all this is to enjoy it. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.